60-foot animal is rising beneath you. It weighs as much as a loaded school bus. Its jaw can snap a fishing boat in half, and it's looking directly at you. Sperm whales are the largest predators on Earth. They produce the loudest sound of any animal alive. They have bigger brains than anything that has ever existed, and they share our oceans with us every single day. So why don't they kill us? We'll go inside their minds, their family bonds, their grief, their language. We'll look at the one time a whale really did destroy a ship, and the hundreds of times one easily could have and didn't. If you enjoy what we make, subscribe and leave a like. It genuinely helps. Prepare yourself. We begin. A 60-foot shadow rises from the deep and the ocean lifts. Imagine you're on a small research boat somewhere in the Atlantic. The water is dark and calm. Your coffee is still warm. Then, without warning, the surface beside you breaks open. A wall of wet, dark skin appears. A head the size of a pickup truck turns slowly toward you. One enormous eye finds yours. And then, nothing happens. The whale floats there. It breathes. A sound like a cannon blast comes from its blowhole. A mist of warm air covers your face. Then it slides back under, quiet as a shadow, and disappears into 3,000 feet of black water. This happens to researchers, divers and sailors more than most people realize, and every single time the whale chooses to leave. That choice is what makes sperm whales one of the most astonishing creatures on this planet, because they absolutely could do something different. Scientists who study sperm whales in the wild describe a specific feeling during these encounters, a kind of stillness. The whale looks at you, and you can feel that it is looking at you. There is a presence behind that eye, an awareness. Researchers who have spent years studying large animals say sperm whale encounters feel different from any other. The whale seems to be reading you. Marine biologist Hal Whitehead has spent decades following sperm whale pods across the world's oceans. He describes the first time a whale surfaced next to his small vessel and turned to face him. He said the experience changed the way he thought about intelligence, about consciousness, about what kind of minds exist in the ocean alongside ours. Here's the wild part. That whale could have ended his career, his boat, and possibly his life without any effort at all. Sperm whales have been documented approaching vessels slowly, circling them, and then simply moving on. They investigate, they observe, then they decide the human isn't worth their time. That decision involves a brain, a massive one. A brain that runs on social information, emotional memory, and something that looks a lot like judgment. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, picture this scene again. You're on that boat. The whale is beside you. You're maybe 8 feet from the largest predator alive. The water between you is nothing. A few inches of fiberglass hull and a prayer. The whale watches you for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, then it dives. You look at the water where it was. There is barely a ripple. This happens somewhere in the ocean almost every day. It has happened to fishermen, to tourists, to military personnel, to scientists running acoustic equipment. In almost every recorded case, the whale makes the same call. It looks, it decides, it leaves. The question that every researcher eventually asks is simple: why? These animals have the size, the strength, the sonar, and the raw physical power to make humans in boats look like toys. They know we're there. Their senses are so advanced that they can read the biology of a creature from hundreds of feet away. They can feel your heartbeat through the water. So what is stopping them? The answer lives somewhere between biology, social behavior, memory, and something that science is only beginning to understand. And the deeper you look, the stranger and more humbling it gets. Because the whale isn't ignoring you, it's making a choice. And that choice says something enormous about what kind of animal a sperm whale really is. Get ready, because the size of this creature alone will make everything else feel different. Size is easy to say and hard to feel until you put it next to something real. A male sperm whale grows to about 60 feet long. That's longer than 2 city buses parked end to end. It weighs around 100,000 pounds. To picture that, Imagine filling a school gymnasium with water and then dropping a fully loaded freight truck inside. That's roughly the mass of one adult male sperm whale. The head alone takes up about 1/3 of its entire body. On a 60-foot whale, that means a head 20 feet long. You could park a car inside it and still have room. Now put yourself in the water next to one. You are on average about 5 feet 8 inches tall. You weigh maybe 150 pounds. The whale outweighs you by more than 600 times. If the whale decided to roll over slightly, just a gentle tilt of its body, the pressure wave alone could send you spinning through the water like a leaf in a storm drain. Researchers who have dived alongside sperm whales talk about the physical experience of the water moving around a whale. Even when the animal is still, you feel its presence. The water shifts, pressure changes. Your eardrums register the mass of the creature before your eyes even focus. Underwater filmmaker and researcher Fabrice Schnuller described hovering next to a resting sperm whale as feeling like floating next to a submarine. But a warm one, a breathing one that was aware of him being there and had decided to allow it. That word, allowed, comes up again and again in accounts from divers. The whale had options, lots of them. A flick of the tail creates a wave powerful enough to flip a small boat. The tail itself, called the fluke, measures about 15 feet across. 15 feet. That's wider than most living rooms. One swing from that fluke generates thousands of pounds of force, and yet the tail stays still. The whale floats, you float, and the two of you exist in the same water, completely different in every possible way. Here's something that makes the size feel even stranger. Sperm whales are built for the deep ocean. They dive to depths of over 7,000 feet. 7,000 feet is deeper than 5 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other, pointing straight down into the earth. They hold their breath for over an hour to do it. When they come back to the surface, they need to breathe and rest. That's the moment most human encounters happen. At the surface, the whale is technically off duty. It's recovering, resting, in a state that, in any other predator, would make it irritable and defensive. A tired, resting shark is a dangerous shark. A tired, resting crocodile is a dangerous crocodile. A tired, resting sperm whale looks at you, breathes, and goes back to sleep. Scientists have tried to explain this calmness through theories about the whale's energy budget, its evolutionary history, its diet. But none of those explanations feel complete, because this isn't passiveness, it's something more deliberate. And when you learn what lives inside the head of a sperm whale, you'll understand why the size stops being the most impressive thing about it. The jaw comes next, and the jaw is where things start getting genuinely unsettling. The jaw opens like a trapdoor. A sperm whale's lower jaw is narrow, long and lined with teeth. Each tooth is about the size and weight of a full soda can, around 7 to 8 inches long and made of solid ivory. A full-grown male carries up to 50 of them. That jaw can open to nearly 90 degrees. Picture a door swinging completely open, flat against the wall. Now picture that door being 20 feet long and lined with teeth the size of your forearm. That's what opens when a sperm whale decides to bite. The bite force is staggering. Scientists estimate that a sperm whale can generate enough pressure in its bite to crush a small boat. The wooden ships of the 1800s were definitely not immune. We know this because at least one whale proved it. But that story comes later. Here's the strange part. The upper jaw has almost no functional teeth. The lower jaw does all the work, and that work is almost entirely reserved for one thing: giant squid. Sperm whales eat massive amounts of squid, some of them the size of a car. They hunt in total darkness, miles underwater, using sonar clicks to locate prey. When they find a squid, the jaw snaps open, water rushes in carrying the prey, and the teeth pin it down. For squid, that jaw is a nightmare. For humans, it almost never activates. There are very few recorded cases of a sperm whale biting a person, and in the rare cases where physical contact has happened, it usually involved a whale that was panicked, cornered, or actively being harmed by whalers with harpoons. One researcher described seeing a sperm whale open its jaw slowly while floating near a diver, almost like a yawn. The diver, understandably, moved away fast. The whale closed its jaw, turned and swam off. Whether that was a warning, curiosity, or just a stretch, nobody knows. What scientists do know is that the jaw seems subject to some kind of internal control when humans are nearby. The whale knows where you are. Its sonar is precise enough to map your skeleton from 30 feet away. It knows your size, it knows you pose no threat to it, and the jaw stays closed. Evolutionary biology offers one explanation. Sperm whales didn't evolve with humans as prey. Their entire jaw system, their hunting instinct, their strike reflex, all of it built over millions of years to handle fast, slippery, deep-sea creatures. A slow, soft, surface-dwelling human doesn't match the pattern. But that can't be the whole story. Because a scared or confused predator often attacks things outside its normal prey. Sharks do it. Big cats do it. Crocodiles do it. Sperm whales, as a rule, don't. Something about how they process the world around them leads to a different outcome, and that something runs on sound. A very specific, very powerful kind of sound that sperm whales use for everything, from navigation to hunting to talking to each other. A sound so intense it can stop your heart. Close your eyes and imagine a sound louder than a jet engine. Now imagine that sound coming from inside a living animal. Sperm whales produce clicks that register at around 230 decibels. To give that a reference point, a jet engine at takeoff hits about 140 decibels. A gunshot is around 160. The threshold for instant hearing damage in humans is around 180. A sperm whale click is more than 50 decibels above that. Sound doesn't work on a straight scale. It works on an exponential one, meaning each 10 decibels is roughly 10 times more intense. At 230 decibels, a sperm whale click carries more acoustic energy than almost anything else alive on Earth has ever produced, and they fire these clicks constantly. The click comes from a system inside the whale's massive head called the spermaceti organ. For a long time, whalers thought this organ, a giant sack of waxy oil filling most of the whale's forehead, was the whale's brain. It's not. It's a sound amplifier, a biological speaker the size of a living room. Sound enters from the whale's nasal passages, bounces through the oil-filled sac, gets reflected off a hard surface at the back of the skull, then focuses forward into the ocean like a beam. The result is a directed, high-powered acoustic pulse that travels through water at around 1 mile per second. At close range, this click can physically stun prey. Researchers have found giant squid with muscle damage consistent with acoustic shock. Scientists believe sperm whales use high-intensity clicks at close range to disable squid before biting. The sound hits the prey like a shockwave, disrupting its muscle control and giving the whale time to close in. Picture a living sonic weapon, built into the face of a 60-foot predator that dives 7,000 feet to use it. The whale fires this weapon dozens of times per minute during a hunt. It fires it to communicate with other whales miles away. It fires it to map the seafloor beneath it. Every click is a transmission and a scan at the same time. Here's the part that changes things. Researchers swimming near sperm whales have reported feeling clicks physically. A pressure wave moving through the chest, a vibration in the jaw and skull. One diver described it as feeling like someone pressed a speaker against your ribs and turned the volume all the way up. And yet the whale modulates. It adjusts. When near divers, researchers have documented sperm whales producing lower intensity clicks, quieter scans. The whale isn't running its sonar at full power near a human. It seems to know the difference between scanning a squid 1,000 feet down and scanning something floating right next to it. That adjustment requires awareness. It requires reading a situation and changing behaviour based on it. And if the whale can tune its sound around a human, it means the whale has already decided something about that human. It has already made a judgment. What exactly that judgment is, and what would happen if the whale made a different one, is something that took one very surprising experiment to start revealing. Nobody planned the first experiment. It happened by accident. A team of underwater researchers in the Caribbean was filming a pod of sperm whales when one whale turned directly toward a diver and began clicking. Full echolocation sequence. The diver was about 30 feet away. The diver described feeling the sound as a full-body experience. Vibrations in the chest, pressure in the sinuses, a low hum that seemed to travel through the teeth. One researcher said it felt like standing inside a speaker at a concert, except the speaker was also scanning you. The whale clicked maybe a dozen times. Then it stopped. It turned away. The diver was fine, but the encounter launched a question that researchers have been chasing ever since. When a sperm whale clicks at a human, what does it perceive? What does the acoustic image of a human look like to a creature that sees the world entirely through sound? Here's what we know. Sperm whale sonar is precise enough to detect objects the size of a tennis ball from hundreds of feet away. It can distinguish between different species of fish at range. It can map the bone structure of prey before striking. When a sperm whale clicks at a human diver, it receives a detailed acoustic picture of that person. It knows you are soft and air-filled. It knows your size. It can hear your heartbeat, your lungs filling with compressed air, the metal of your tank, the rubber of your wetsuit. The whale receives all of this in a fraction of a second, and then it decides what to do with it. Scientists studying sperm whale clicks near divers have found something remarkable. The high-powered clicks, the ones used to stun squid, appear in a specific pattern called a creak. That creak is the whale locking onto a target at close range for a strike. In thousands of hours of recorded encounters between sperm whales and human divers, researchers have almost never detected a creak directed at a person. The hunting click sequence doesn't activate for humans. The whale scans, it identifies, and then it switches modes. In some encounters, after scanning a diver, whales have produced a different kind of click pattern, slower, more rhythmic, softer. The same pattern they use when communicating with other whales. Researchers describe this as the whale essentially switching from hunting mode to social mode. The whale scanned a human, decided the human was a social entity, not prey, and started talking. That conclusion sounds almost too much. It sounds like projection, like researchers assigning human meaning to animal behaviour. But the acoustic data supports it. The click patterns are measurably different, and the switch happens consistently. One researcher, after reviewing hundreds of hours of footage, put it this way: the whale knows the difference between a meal and a stranger, and it treats the stranger like it might actually have something to say. What happens in the whale's mind during that decision is still largely unknown, but to understand it even slightly, you have to go somewhere most humans never go. Down past the sunlight, down past where pressure crushes metal, down into the place where sperm whales spend most of their lives. The light disappears at around 600 feet. Below that, the ocean is absolute black. No sun, no colour, no up or down that your eyes can tell you. Pressure at those depths would crush a human instantly. The cold approaches freezing, and somewhere in that darkness, a sperm whale is hunting. It dove from the surface about 15 minutes ago. It took a breath, tilted its body downward, and dropped. No fins kicking, no effort visible, just gravity and hydrodynamics pulling 60,000 pounds of animals straight down at around 6 miles per hour. By the time it reaches the hunting zone, around 3,000 feet down, the whale is operating in a world where light has never touched, and it can see every inch of it. Not with eyes, with clicks. Every 2 seconds or so, the whale fires a burst of sound. The clicks fan out in a cone ahead of it, travelling through the water until they hit something and bounce back. The whale's lower jaw, filled with a special oil that conducts sound, picks up the returning echoes. Its brain assembles those echoes into a 3-dimensional map of everything around it. In this map, the whale sees a giant squid. Giant squid are genuinely enormous. The one sperm whales hunt can reach 30 feet long and weigh as much as 700 pounds. They have eyes the size of dinner plates. They have 8 arms lined with suckers, each sucker rimmed with sharp hooks. They are fast, aggressive, and built to fight. When the whale locks onto one, it shifts into a creak pattern, rapid-fire clicks that tighten the acoustic image, giving the whale a precise lock on the squid's position. The squid often tries to flee, jetting backward through the water. The whale accelerates. In the dark, 2 monsters are closing the gap at full speed. The whale opens its jaw. The squid fires ink. The jaw closes. This happens multiple times a day for an adult sperm whale. Scientists estimate that a fully grown male eats around a ton of squid per day. 1 ton per day. The evidence for these hunts lives on the whale's skin. Almost every adult sperm whale carries circular scars across its head and body. Each scar is from a squid sucker hook, dragged across the whale's skin during the struggle. Some scars are as wide as dinner plates. Some whales look like they've been tattooed by the deep sea itself. And here's something that makes the whole picture stranger. Researchers found squid beaks in sperm whale stomachs from species that humans hadn't even officially discovered yet. The whale's daily commute goes places science hasn't mapped. It hunts things we don't know exist yet, in places we can't reach, every day. When it finally surfaces again after an hour or more underwater, it floats. It breathes long, slow breaths. It rests. And sometimes a human boat floats nearby. The whale, fresh from a battle with a 30-foot squid in total darkness, ignores the boat, or investigates it calmly, or drifts away. To understand why, you have to understand who else is on the surface with the whale. Because sperm whales almost never travel alone. Pull back from one whale and you see the group. Sperm whale society is split completely by gender. Females and young calves live together in tight pods, usually between 6 and 20 individuals, in warm tropical and subtropical waters. They stay together for life. The same females, the same calves, travelling the same routes, year after year, decade after decade. The males are different. Adult males leave the group when they're around 6 years old and head toward colder, polar waters where food is more plentiful. They spend most of their lives alone or in loose bachelor groups, only returning to tropical waters to find females during mating season. Then they leave again. So the female pod is the heart of sperm whale society, and it functions like a neighbourhood where everybody knows everybody has a job, and the group takes care of its own. The pod moves together, hunts in the same general area, surfaces together to breathe, and rests in synchronised patterns near the surface. When one whale is sick or injured, the others slow down to match its pace. Researchers have documented pods travelling at half their normal speed for days, sometimes weeks, because one member couldn't keep up. Slowing down costs energy. It costs time. It makes the group more vulnerable, and they do it anyway. The decision-making about when to dive, when to rest, when to move to a different area, appears to be distributed across the group. Older females, the ones who have seen the most and know the most, carry the most influence. Their experience is the group's memory. Their roots are the group's map. Scientists have tracked pods returning to the same feeding areas, the same resting spots, the same migration routes across decades. The roots don't come from instinct alone, they get passed down. A grandmother whale who learned where the best hunting is in a certain stretch of ocean carries that knowledge in her behaviour, and younger whales learn from watching her. This is cultural transmission. Information moving between generations through experience and observation, the same basic process that gives human societies their history. Think about what that means for a second. A whale pod moving through the Pacific right now might be following a route that was first established by a whale born 150 years ago. But the social bond runs deeper than just shared maps and routes. It runs into something that looks, when you watch it, a lot like love. And the way that love shows up is most obvious in the youngest members of the group, the calves. Because protecting those calves is something the entire pod takes seriously enough to risk everything. A sperm whale calf is born into an ocean full of things that want to eat it. Orcas hunt sperm whale calves. Large sharks occasionally try. And a newborn sperm whale, though it's already about 13 feet long and weighs around a ton at birth, is vulnerable in ways the adults are not. It can't dive deep yet. It can't produce the powerful clicks of an adult. It stays near the surface while its mother hunts below. So the pod shares babysitting duties. While a mother dives to hunt, other females in the group stay near the surface with the calf. These babysitters aren't the calf's mother or even necessarily its closest relatives. They're just members of the pod, and they take the job seriously. Researchers have observed these surface sitters physically positioning themselves between calves and approaching boats. When a vessel comes too close to a calf, the nearby adults move in, forming a loose barrier. They don't charge the boat. They don't make aggressive sounds. They simply place their bodies between the calf and the potential threat. The calves nurse for years, some for up to a decade. During that time, the entire pod's behaviour shifts to accommodate the calf's needs. The group dives shallower than it normally would. It rests more often. The youngest member sets the pace, and when something goes wrong, the response from the group is immediate and physical. In one documented case, a calf that had died was kept at the surface by its mother for multiple days. Other females in the pod took turns supporting the body, preventing it from sinking. They swam in slow circles around it. They produced quiet, low-frequency sounds that researchers describe as different from any other vocalization in the whale's known range. Scientists are careful with language when describing this behavior. They use words like mourning-like or grief-adjacent. They acknowledge they can't access the internal experience of the whale, but the behavior itself is measurable and real. The pod changed its entire routine to stay with a dead calf for days. The mothers involved in these events have been observed showing signs of what, in a human, you would call depression afterward. Reduced appetite, slower movement, less social interaction, behaviors that lasted weeks. This is where the science starts to push against a wall, because the data keeps pointing in one direction, and that direction is uncomfortable for anyone who wants to believe that animal behavior is purely mechanical. These whales feel something. The evidence is in what they do. And what they do, especially around death, around loss, around the protection of the young, looks startlingly familiar. But the most startling moment in the relationship between sperm whales and humans didn't involve a calf at all. It involved an injured diver. And what the whales did next left researchers genuinely speechless. The diver was in trouble. In 2008, a research diver working in the waters near the Azores became entangled in a line connected to an underwater survey device. The current was strong. The equipment was pulling the diver down. She was struggling to free herself and couldn't surface. The pod of sperm whales she had been observing was about 30 feet away. What happened next was captured on camera and has been analysed by marine researchers ever since. The whales moved. They organised. Within seconds, several individuals from the pod had positioned themselves around the diver in a loose ring, heads pointing inward. Researchers watching the footage later described the formation as similar to a rosette, the same circular defensive pattern sperm whales use to protect injured group members from predators. One whale moved directly beneath the diver and nudged her upward with its head. Not hard, gently, a push toward the surface. The diver broke free of the line. She surfaced. She was okay. The whales dispersed and resumed normal behaviour. Now, science demands caution here. Confirming what a whale intended by a specific action is extremely difficult. The nudge could have been the whale investigating a strange object. The ring formation could have been coincidental positioning. Researchers who study animal behaviour are trained to resist conclusions that sound like a fairy tale. But here is what's harder to dismiss. The formation the whales took matches a specific behaviour pattern, the rosette, that researchers have documented in dozens of other sperm whale encounters involving injured or distressed pod members. The behaviour is not random, it has a structure, and the whales applied that structure to a distressed human. The whale beneath the diver produced a series of low-frequency clicks during the encounter, not the high-powered sonar of a hunt, a slower, quieter pattern that researchers associate with close-range social contact. The entire sequence lasted under 2 minutes, organised, calm, and effective. 3 possible explanations have been put forward by the scientific community. First, the whales applied a known social behaviour to a creature that displayed distress signals they recognised. Second, the whales were curious and accidentally helpful. Third, the whales made a deliberate decision to assist a creature outside their species. All 3 explanations require the whale to have registered the diver's distress. All 3 require some form of social processing, and the third one requires something that most scientists still struggle to say out loud about an animal. What makes the story even harder to dismiss is something that came later. Researchers began looking into whether sperm whales had memory of individual humans, and what they found was something nobody had fully expected. Scientists know that sperm whales remember their own kind for a lifetime. A whale separated from its pod for years will produce calls that its original pod members respond to. The relationship doesn't fade, the recognition doesn't disappear. But do they remember humans? The data is harder to collect, but what exists is striking. Researchers who work in the same areas year after year have reported consistent patterns. Whales that were calm during one season's encounters remain calm in the next. Whales that were startled or disturbed by a specific type of boat or equipment show avoidance of similar boats in following years. The response isn't random, it correlates with previous experience. In the Azores, a research team noticed that specific whale pods responded differently to their research vessel than to other boats in the area. The team's vessel moved slowly, used passive acoustic equipment, and kept its distance. Over several years, the pods near that vessel became progressively more relaxed, closer approaches, longer stays at the surface, less startling at engine sounds. Pods that had encountered aggressive fishing or research vessels in the past maintained higher alert levels even years later. This is associative memory. The whale connects a stimulus, a specific type of boat, a specific sound, even a specific researcher's presence, with a past experience and adjusts its current behaviour accordingly. Hal Whitehead's research team documented a whale that had been individually identified by its unique dorsal fin shape. This whale had been present in calm encounters with the research team across multiple trips, spanning nearly a decade. Each time the team's vessel appeared in the whale's area, this specific individual was among the first to approach and investigate. Coincidence across 10 years is hard to argue. Sperm whale brains run on the same basic memory architecture as mammal brains generally. Hippocampal structures for episodic memory, the kind that stores specific experiences with specific context, are present and large. The sheer size of the brain suggests enormous storage capacity. But there's a layer beneath the memory that matters even more, because memory of individual experience implies something that sits at the edge of what most people are comfortable attributing to animals. It implies that the whale has a sense of time, a sense that the past was real, that it connects to the present, and that future encounters might follow a similar pattern. The whale doesn't just react, it anticipates. And if it anticipates, if it plans even in the most basic way, then what is happening inside that brain during the moments before it chooses to leave a human alone? To even begin answering that, you need to understand what makes sperm whale intelligence so unusual. And the answer starts not with individual brains, but with something they share. Their culture, their dialects, their traditions, the things that get passed down through generations like stories around a fire. 2 sperm whale pods swim in the same stretch of ocean. They eat the same prey. They breathe the same air, they are the same species, but when they click, they sound completely different. Sperm whales communicate using patterns of clicks called codas. A coda is a short rhythmic sequence, something like a coded knock. 2 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, 1 tap. Every pod has its own set of codas, a dialect that identifies where the whale is from and who it belongs to. Researcher Luke Rendell and Hal Whitehead spent years mapping these dialects across the Pacific and Atlantic, and what they found surprised even them. Distinct whale populations separated by thousands of miles of open ocean have dialects so different that they almost never overlap. A whale from the eastern Pacific and a whale from the eastern Atlantic produce click patterns that share almost no common sequences, and the dialects are learned. Calves born into a pod don't arrive knowing the family's coda set. They learn it. They listen to the adults around them, practice their own versions, and gradually refine their clicks to match the group's pattern, just like a child learning to speak. What makes this more than just animal communication is the stability of the dialects across time. Researchers comparing recordings made decades apart in the same regions find the same core coda patterns still in use. The tradition holds. The dialect is maintained not by genetics, but by social teaching. Scientists call this non-genetic cultural inheritance. It's the same mechanism that lets human languages persist across generations. You don't inherit English from your parents' biology. You learn it from the people around you. Sperm whales do exactly this with their acoustic identity. The codas also carry social information beyond just group identity. Subtle variations in timing, rhythm, and intensity seem to carry individual signatures. Researchers believe individual whales can be identified by the specific way they produce shared codas, the way you can recognize a friend's voice even when they're saying the same words as 100 other people. And here's the piece that stops researchers cold. When two pods meet in the open ocean, pods that share no genetic connection and may have never met before, they sometimes exchange codas. They click at each other. They listen. Some researchers describe this as whales introducing themselves. In a few documented cases, whales from different pods have temporarily joined together for short periods, travelling and resting in the same group before separating again. During these meetings, the coda exchanges increase dramatically. Something social is happening, something that looks like strangers meeting, trading information, and then going their separate ways. And what happened when humans showed up and started systematically destroying these social networks? When whalers didn't just kill individual whales but broke apart pods, hunted matriarchs, and shattered the transmission lines for all of this accumulated cultural knowledge? The answer is darker than most people realise. By the middle of the 20th century, sperm whales were dying at a rate that should have collapsed the species. Industrial whaling fleets hunted sperm whales across every major ocean on Earth. At its peak, between the 1940s and 1970s, whalers were killing tens of thousands of sperm whales per year. Some estimates put the total kill across 3 centuries of hunting at over 1 million individual animals. 1 million! The hunters targeted the largest males because they carried the most spermaceti oil, the most valuable product. The biggest, strongest, most experienced individuals were killed first. The matriarchs of female pods were taken. The animals that carried the most cultural knowledge, the longest memories, the deepest experience, were gone. From a biological standpoint, this was catastrophic. But from a behavioural standpoint, something happened that scientists still find remarkable. The whales mostly didn't fight back. There were exceptions. The most famous one is the Essex, and that story demands its own chapter. But as a general pattern, across centuries of industrialised hunting, sperm whales responded to human hunters with flight. They dove deep. They moved away. They ran. Some changed their behaviour in measurable ways. Pod sizes in heavily hunted regions shrank. Whales began spending more time at depth during daylight hours, reducing their surface time, which reduced their exposure to hunters in boats. The species adapted behaviourally at the population level, but organised resistance, coordinated aggression toward whalers, the evidence for it is nearly absent. Think about what this means. These are animals with strong social bonds, long memories, and the physical power to destroy wooden ships. They watched members of their family get harpooned and dragged away. They heard the distress calls. They had the tools to fight back. They did it essentially once. Documented definitively once. Researchers have proposed various explanations. One is that sperm whale social behaviour is oriented entirely toward cooperation within the group, and aggression toward external threats is simply not a strong part of their behavioural toolkit. They are built for collaboration, not warfare. Another explanation is that the whales correctly understood that fighting back carried catastrophic risk. The boats could return, the harpoons could come again. Flight was the safer strategy, even if it didn't feel like one. A third explanation is harder to test. Some researchers suggest that sperm whale culture, their traditions and their shared knowledge, may not include humans as a threat category that triggers active defense. Humans arrived as hunters too recently in evolutionary time for that response to develop. Whatever the reason, 1 million dead whales and the species chose, with almost no exceptions, not to kill back. That one exception, though, is a story that changed how humans thought about the ocean, and how some scientists think about whale behaviour to this day. November the 14th, 1820. The whaling ship Essex was sailing in the Pacific Ocean, about 2,000 miles west of South America. The crew had just launched their small hunting boats and harpooned a whale nearby. The rest of the hunt was routine. Men in small boats, ropes, harpoons, a job they'd done dozens of times. Then something in the water changed. A large male sperm whale, estimated at around 85 feet long based on crew descriptions, was spotted about 300 feet ahead of the ship. It was lying at the surface, facing the Essex. Crew members noticed it was behaving unusually. Its head was turning slowly toward the ship. Then it began to swim toward them. It accelerated. By the time anyone on deck understood what was happening, the whale was moving at an estimated 7 miles per hour and closing fast. It struck the Essex head-on. The impact shook the entire ship. The whale hit the bow with enough force to stun the crew, then it dove, circled, and came back. The second strike was harder. Crew members later described hearing the plank splitting below the waterline. The Essex, a fully loaded whaling ship of about 90 feet, began filling with water. Within 45 minutes of the second strike, the ship had capsized. 20 sailors were stranded in 3 small open boats in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 2,000 miles from the nearest reliable port. The story of their survival is one of the most harrowing in maritime history. Only 8 of the 20 men made it back alive. The event became the most famous whale attack in history, eventually inspiring Herman Melville's novel Moby Dick. But beyond the literature, it forced a question that whalers had been avoiding for decades. Was the attack deliberate? The behaviour of the whale is hard to explain as accident. It approached the ship, which was not involved in the active hunt. It struck twice. Between the strikes it dove, which required a choice, and then returned on a second attack run. The second strike was more powerful than the first. Experienced whalers, men who had spent their lives around these animals, said they had never seen anything like it, and many of them, privately, believed the whale knew exactly what it was doing. The captain of the Essex, George Pollard, said the attack felt purposeful. His first mate, Owen Chase, who wrote a detailed account, described the whale's behaviour as bearing the marks of decided, calculated violence. For over 2 centuries, debate about the Essex has continued. Was it a unique event? An individual whale making a decision no other whale had made? Or was it evidence that beneath the calm exterior of this species something else entirely could emerge? To understand the Essex attack, start with what was happening around that whale before it charged. Sperm whales communicate over enormous distances. A distress call from a harpooned whale travels through water at nearly a mile per second. Other whales in the area hear it immediately. The clicking patterns associated with fear and injury are distinct from normal hunting or social clicks. They are recognisable. On the day of the Essex attack, the crew had already harpooned at least 1 whale nearby. That whale's distress signals were moving through the water in every direction. Every sperm whale within several miles could hear it. The whale that attacked the Essex had been at the surface when it turned toward the ship. It was in a position to hear, through sound conducted into its jaw from the water, what was happening to the other whale. It may have been processing those sounds for minutes before it charged. If the whale associated the ship with the source of the distress call, then the attack had a target, a specific, identified threat. And the behaviour that followed, the deliberate approach, the pause, the second strike, becomes consistent with a creature that had made a decision. Researchers today use the term targeted aggression carefully. It requires evidence that the animal distinguished one specific object from its environment and directed force at it with persistent intent. The Essex whale did all three. It approached the ship, not the small hunting boats. It struck the hull at the waterline, the most structurally damaging point. It dove and returned. A researcher named Hal Whitehead, whose work on sperm whale culture has been central to the field, has written about the Essex in the context of cultural learning. His argument is that sperm whale pods share information about threats. If one whale had a negative encounter with a specific type of vessel, that experience could be communicated to others and influence group behaviour. The whale that attacked the Essex might not have been reacting to the Essex specifically. It might have been reacting to a category: ships, whalers, the floating objects that send harpoons and cause distress calls. If that's true, the attack wasn't random at all. It was policy. But if whales can form something like policy, if they can categorize threats and decide to act against them, then why has aggression toward humans stayed so rare? Why did one species produce one documented ship attack in centuries of brutal hunting? Part of the answer is in the whale's brain, specifically in what scientists found inside it when they finally looked closely enough. And what they found inside the sperm whale brain is something that has genuinely unsettled the scientific community. Every documented case of a sperm whale showing aggression toward a modern human follows the same pattern. The whale was cornered, the whale was injured, the whale was protecting a calf, or a combination of all three. In modern whale-watching literature, there are a handful of cases where sperm whales made aggressive movements toward boats, charges that stopped short, jaw displays, tail slaps that sent spray across nearby decks. In every reviewed case, researchers were able to identify a specific trigger. A boat had cut off the whale's escape route. A vessel had positioned itself directly between a mother and her calf. A whale had been struck by a boat's propeller and was already bleeding. Or in several cases, military sonar exercises nearby had been producing sounds at intensities that interfered with the whale's own acoustic system. Remove the trigger and the aggression disappears. This pattern is important because it tells you something specific about how the aggression works. It's reactive, not predatory. The whale doesn't hunt humans. It doesn't stalk boats. It doesn't plan ambushes. When pushed far enough, when threatened in a specific and direct way, it pushes back. That's a fundamentally different kind of aggression from what a predator shows toward prey. A shark in feeding mode is looking for something to eat. A sperm whale, in the rare moments of aggression documented in modern records, is looking to neutralize a specific threat to itself or its family. The distinction matters enormously. Predatory aggression is offensive. Defensive aggression is reactive. Sperm whales show almost exclusively the second kind toward humans, and only when pushed to it. There are also anecdotal accounts from older fishing communities in regions where sperm whales are common, where individual whales have been observed following fishing vessels for extended periods without aggression, watching the nets being hauled, watching the humans on deck, curious, calm, observant. The same animal that can register acoustic distress signals from a harpooned whale at 2 miles away, that has the memory to associate ship types with past events, and the physical power to destroy a wooden vessel in 2 strikes, rides alongside fishing boats like a curious shadow. The patience in that behaviour is almost difficult to process, and when you look at the brain that's running all of this, both the aggression and the restraint, you start to understand why. Because the sperm whale brain is doing something that only a handful of animals on Earth can do. A human brain weighs about 3 pounds, a sperm whale brain weighs about 18 pounds. That makes it the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived on this planet. Larger than any dinosaurs, larger than any land animal, larger, by significant measure, than any other whale. But brain size alone doesn't tell you much. A whale is simply a much bigger animal than a human, and bigger animals tend to have bigger brains just to run their bigger bodies. Size relative to body mass matters more, and on that measure humans still come out ahead. What matters more than raw size is what's inside the brain, and how it's organised. Sperm whale brains have a highly developed neocortex. In humans, the neocortex handles complex thinking, sensory processing, language, and decision-making. In sperm whales, the neocortex is large and heavily folded, meaning it has enormous surface area packed into a compact space. More folds mean more processing power. The limbic system, the part of the brain associated with emotion, memory, and social bonding, is also large in sperm whales relative to their overall brain size. This is the part that lights up in humans during grief, during attachment, during fear, and during empathy. In sperm whales, this system is proportionally large in a way that suggests a rich emotional life. But the most surprising thing scientists found was in the connections between brain regions. Sperm whale brains have dense networks linking the areas associated with social behavior and emotional processing to the areas handling acoustic communication. The brain is literally wired to connect sound with emotion and social meaning. Think about what that means. When a sperm whale hears a distress call from another whale, the signal travels to brain regions that process emotional significance, not just sound. The hearing and the feeling happen together. The whale doesn't just detect distress, it responds to it. For a species that lives in a world of sound, where communication, hunting, navigation, and social bonding all happen through clicks, this wiring makes functional sense. But it also has an unexpected consequence. It means the whale's emotional and social processing is directly coupled to its acoustic environment. And inside sperm whale brains, scientists found cells that no one expected to find there. Cells that, in humans, are associated with one of the most complex social capacities we possess. In 1999, a neuroscientist named Patrick Hoff was studying brain tissue from humpback whales when he found something unexpected. He found spindle neurons. Spindle neurons, also called von Economo neurons, are elongated brain cells with a very specific shape. In humans, they exist in only two brain regions, both associated with higher social function. They help process trust, recognize social signals, and are directly linked to empathy, the ability to sense and respond to what another individual is experiencing. For decades, spindle neurons were considered a marker of advanced social intelligence. They were found in great apes first, then in humans, then Hoff found them in humpbacks, then shortly after in sperm whales, not just found in large numbers. Sperm whales have spindle neurons concentrated in brain regions that, in humans, handle social recognition, emotional response, and what researchers describe as the intuitive sense of another being's inner state. The scientific community reacted with caution, then with serious interest. Finding spindle neurons doesn't automatically mean a whale feels empathy. The cells are associated with that function in humans, but brains are complex systems, and the same cell can potentially serve different functions in different species. But then researchers looked at the sperm whale's evolutionary timeline. These cells appear to have existed in the sperm whale lineage for around 30 million years. In humans, spindle neurons are about 15 million years old. Sperm whales had them first. Whatever function spindle neurons serve in complex social mammals, sperm whales have had twice as long to develop it. 2 times as long for this particular neural architecture to become integrated into the whale's social behavior, its communication system, its group dynamics. The implications are large and genuinely uncomfortable for the way humans have traditionally thought about animal cognition. Because if these cells do what they do in humans, or something functionally equivalent, then what happens when a sperm whale looks at a diver in distress and moves toward them is running on hardware built for exactly that response. Detecting another creature's state, registering it, responding to it. Empathy is a strong word to apply to any animal. Scientists resist it for good reasons. But the structural evidence is sitting there in the brain tissue, in 30 million years of evolutionary history, in the documented behavior of animals that protect injured strangers and slow down for dying pod members. And the picture gets even more layered when you look at what sperm whales do when one of their own dies. Because the behavior around death documented repeatedly and across different populations, goes somewhere that the data didn't prepare researchers for. The whale had been dead for hours. A research team in the Strait of Gibraltar documented a female sperm whale supporting the body of a dead calf at the ocean's surface. She held it up with her head, nudging it toward the air. She circled it slowly. Other females from the pod came and went, touching the body with their rostrums, the front of their heads, before pulling back. The behavior lasted for days. Scientists call this epimelectic behavior, caregiving directed at a dead or dying group member. It has been documented in dolphins, orcas, and elephants. In sperm whales, researchers have now collected enough cases that it has become a recognized pattern. The mother doesn't eat during these events. She doesn't sleep in her normal patterns. She stays with the calf and continues contact long past any biological reason to do so. Other pod members adjust their behavior around her, staying nearby, moving slowly, producing low-frequency vocalizations unlike anything recorded in their normal repertoire. In one documented case off the Canary Islands, a female sperm whale carried her dead calf for over a week. She swam slower than normal. She surfaced more frequently. Researchers following the pod noted that the entire group's behavior shifted during this period. Dive times shortened. The usual foraging routine disappeared. The pod reorganized around the grieving mother. When the calf's body finally sank, the mother continued circling the area where it went down. These observations create a scientific problem. The data is too consistent to dismiss, but the conclusion it points toward is one that researchers are trained to approach with extreme care. To say that a whale grieves implies that the whale experiences loss, and experiencing loss implies an emotional inner life with a degree of self-awareness that science has traditionally reserved for humans and a small number of other species. But the alternative explanation, that the behavior is purely mechanical, a biological glitch where the caregiving circuit fails to shut off when the calf stops responding, runs into a problem. The other pod members don't have a biological caregiving bond with that calf. They have no reproductive reason to stay and slow down and produce unusual sounds. They do it anyway. If this were a circuit error, it would be isolated to the mother. Instead, it ripples through the whole group. Grief, in human psychology, is fundamentally social. We don't just mourn alone. We mourn together. We adjust our behavior around each other's loss. We recognize pain in others and respond to it. The sperm whale pod does exactly this. And if the pod can register and respond to the pain of loss, then the way these animals communicate about their inner states becomes critical. Because they do communicate. Specifically, constantly, and in ways researchers are only beginning to decode. The clicks have a name when they go social, and what those clicks might be saying is one of the most exciting and unresolved questions in marine biology right now. Two pods meet in open water. They have never encountered each other before. They are the same species but from different regions, carrying different dialects, different cultural histories. For a few minutes, both groups slow down. They drift close. And then the clicking begins, not the rapid-fire sonar of a hunt. Slow, rhythmic, patterned clicks. Codas. Back and forth between individuals in each pod, like a conversation where both sides are listening carefully. Researcher Shane Giro has spent over 15 years recording and analysing sperm whale codas in the Caribbean. His team has logged thousands of coda exchanges across dozens of individual whales, tracking specific animals over their lifetimes. What the data shows is layered. At the broadest level, codas identify clan membership. Whales from the same cultural group share a set of core coda patterns. When a whale produces one of these patterns, it's broadcasting its identity, where it comes from, who it belongs to. At the next level, individual whales vary their codas in subtle ways that function as personal signatures. The timing between clicks, the rhythm of a specific sequence, the slight variations in how a shared pattern is produced. These differences are consistent across years for the same individual. Giro's team can identify specific whales by their coda signatures the way you might recognize a person's handwriting. At the finest level, something is still being decoded. Within social interactions between familiar whales, coders appear to carry information that researchers haven't fully mapped yet. The same basic pattern produced in different contexts, different emotional states of the group, with different individuals present, seems to carry different weight. Some researchers compare this to intonation in human speech. The words can be the same, but how you say them changes the meaning. During meeting events, when pods from different clans come together, there is a specific pattern of coder exchange that researchers call socializing sequences. These are not the hunting clicks. They are not the distress calls. They are slow, deliberate patterned exchanges where whales take turns. One clicks, another responds, a third adds to it. The sequence builds. Jero describes watching these encounters and having the distinct impression that something meaningful is being transmitted. That information specific to that moment, that meeting, those individuals, is passing between animals. Science doesn't yet have a word for what that information contains. The clicks don't map to a human language in any clean way. There's no dictionary. The code, if it is a code, hasn't been broken, but the structure is there, the turns are there, the responses are there. And at least one extraordinary story suggests that what travels through these clicks goes beyond just identity. It goes somewhere into the territory of compassion. The dolphin had a spinal deformity. Its spine curved to one side, giving it an S shape that made normal swimming impossible. It couldn't keep up with its own species. It couldn't hunt properly. Alone in the open ocean, a dolphin in this condition typically doesn't survive long, but this one did, for years. Researchers observing a sperm whale pod in the Atlantic documented a bottlenose dolphin with this deformity living and travelling within the pod, fully integrated, resting with the whales at the surface, being groomed by juvenile whales, a behaviour where one animal rubs against another in social contact. The dolphin was clearly not a sperm whale. It communicated differently, it moved differently, it had no obvious function within the pod's social hierarchy. The whales gained nothing measurable from its presence. They kept it anyway. This kind of interspecies adoption is rare and documented with skepticism in the scientific literature. Critics argue that the dolphin simply followed the pod opportunistically and the whales tolerated it. That's possible. Tolerance and adoption are different things. But the grooming changes the picture. Grooming in cetaceans is a social bonding behaviour. It's something animals do with members of their group, with individuals they have a relationship with. When a juvenile sperm whale rubs against the deformed dolphin in slow, deliberate passes, it's not accidental proximity. It's contact. It's interaction. The dolphin was observed interacting with juvenile whales repeatedly across the researchers' observation period. These weren't one-off events. They were a pattern. The dolphin had established relationships within the pod. Individual juveniles sought it out, and it sought them. Whatever was happening in those exchanges, the dolphin was alive and social, in an environment where, without the pod, it almost certainly wouldn't have been. Biologists are careful about the word compassion when applied to animals. Compassion implies sensing another creature's need and choosing to respond to it in a way that cost you something. The whales got nothing obvious from the dolphin, and yet there they were, slowing down at the surface to let it keep up, letting it into their social space, letting a juvenile touch it. Some researchers use the term altruism, behaviour that benefits another at a cost to the self, with no direct return. In evolutionary biology, altruism within a species can be explained by genetics. You help your relatives survive because they share your genes. But altruism toward a different species entirely is much harder to account for with standard models. The pod had no genetic stake in that dolphin's survival, and still, something in how these animals processed the world around them produced a response to a struggling creature that kept it alive. That same something keeps them from harming us. But understanding it completely means going somewhere no researcher expected to go. Into the strange, quiet, almost alien way that sperm whales spend a third of their lives. in a state that nobody even knew was possible for an animal this size. Nobody was looking for sleeping whales. In 2008, a research team sailing near the Strait of Gibraltar came across something that made no sense. A group of sperm whales, about 6 of them, floating vertically in the water with their heads at the surface and their bodies pointing straight down, like enormous grey buoys, completely still. The team cut their engine and drifted close. The whales didn't react. One researcher leaned over the side of the boat and touched a whale's back. The whale didn't flinch. It didn't produce a sound. It didn't move. The team realized they had found a pod of sperm whales in deep sleep. Later analysis confirmed what they had witnessed. Sperm whales enter sleep states by floating vertically at the surface, usually in groups, and dropping into a near-complete cessation of brain activity for periods of around 10 to 15 minutes at a time. Their breathing slows dramatically. Their bodies don't move. They are functionally unconscious. A subsequent study, published in 2008, found that sperm whales appear to spend only about 7% of their time in this sleep state. 7%. That works out to roughly 1 to 2 hours per day. Scientists believe this is among the lowest sleep requirements of any mammal on record. For comparison, humans need roughly 30% of their day in sleep to function properly. What happens during those vertical sleep sessions appears to be something similar to what happens in humans during the deepest phases of rest. Brain maintenance, memory consolidation, the storage and organization of experiences from the day's social and acoustic interactions. The information gathered during a day of clicking, socializing and foraging gets sorted and filed during those quiet, vertical minutes at the surface. Here's the part that makes the sleep story weirder. When the sleeping pods were photographed from above using drones and aerial cameras, they were always arranged in a loose cluster. Heads up, bodies down, touching at various points, drifting slowly together. Even in unconsciousness, the whales maintained their social geometry. They slept together, organized, close, and they were completely vulnerable. A sleeping sperm whale pod at the surface is about as defenseless as these animals get. Their sonar is off. Their awareness is minimal. Their enormous bodies are floating in full view. Any threat that arrived during those 10 or 15 minutes would find them at their weakest. In the wild ocean, vulnerability equals danger. Almost every large animal has strategies to avoid deep sleep in exposed locations. They hide. They take turns watching. They choose protected spots. Sperm whales sleep in the open ocean, in the middle of the surface, with no lookout, in clear daylight. Either they have so few natural threats that this vulnerability doesn't matter, or their social trust runs so deep that the group itself provides some form of shared security, even while unconscious. Both possibilities say something extraordinary about what it means to be a sperm whale, and both possibilities are written in the body of every whale alive today, in marks that tell a story no sleep session can erase. You can read a sperm whale's life in its skin. Every adult sperm whale carries scars, circular marks from squid suckers, some larger than a dinner plate, scattered across the head and face. Long raking lines across the flanks from other males, left during competition for mating rights. Propeller cuts, straight and parallel, from boat collisions that happened years or decades before. On older males especially, the skin becomes a dense archive of experience. Researchers use these scars to identify individual whales the way a detective might use fingerprints. The pattern is unique, permanent, a record that doesn't fade. The squid scars alone tell a story that's hard to imagine. To leave a mark that large, a squid sucker has to dig into the whale's tough outer skin with enough force to cause lasting tissue damage. That means the squid was fighting back hard enough to hurt a 60-foot animal that outweighs it by a factor of nearly 100. The hunts are real battles, and the whales carry the evidence on their faces for the rest of their lives. The male-on-male scars tell a different story. Adult male sperm whales, when they return to tropical waters during mating season, sometimes clash directly. Two males approaching the same female pod can lead to confrontation. These aren't gentle nudges. Males have been documented biting each other's jaws in direct combat, leaving tooth-marked scars that match the spacing of another sperm whale's teeth. A whale with heavy male-on-male scarring has won competitions. It has faced rivals its own size and survived. The scars are a record of dominance, of seasons won, of fights that shaped who got to pass on their genes. And then there are the human scars. Propeller marks, usually on the flank or back, are a signature of vessel strikes. These are often clean and parallel, as distinctive as the squid marks. Researchers who track individual whales across years sometimes watch those propeller scars change. New ones appear, old ones pale but never fully vanish. A whale with multiple sets of propeller scars has survived multiple strikes. It kept swimming, it kept diving, it kept returning to the surface in areas shared with human boats. What no researcher has yet documented is a whale that was struck by a boat and subsequently attacked that boat or any other vessel. The scarred whale surfaces. It breathes, it dives, it continues. The patience written into that behaviour is almost impossible to put into human terms. An animal marked by human carelessness, returning to the same waters, continuing its life alongside the species that scarred it. And that restraint holds even in the situations where restraint looks, from any outside angle, completely irrational. The situations where humans are actively taking from the whale's world, right beside it, in plain view. This is one of the stranger documented behaviours in marine biology. Sperm whales in the Gulf of Alaska, the Bering Sea, and the Sea of Okhotsk have learned something useful. They follow longline fishing vessels and take fish directly off the lines before the boats haul them in. The behaviour is called depredation. The whales figured out that a boat dragging a line full of sablefish or Patagonian toothfish is essentially a moving buffet. Instead of diving thousands of feet to hunt, they follow the boat, wait for the lines to come close enough, and pull off the catch. They do this openly, in full view of the crew, often right beside the vessel, and the boats can't stop them. Fishermen have tried acoustic deterrence. They've tried changing line retrieval speeds. They've tried random vessel manoeuvres. The whales learn to compensate almost immediately. In one region, researchers documented individual whales that had been successfully stealing from fishing lines for over a decade. The relationship between those whales and those fishing boats is complicated. The crews find it frustrating, the whales find it efficient, and at no point in the documented record of this ongoing interaction has a whale physically threatened a crew member. Fishermen standing at the stern of a boat, pulling in a line, sometimes find themselves looking directly at a sperm whale surfacing 6 feet away to take a fish off the same line they're hauling. The whale takes the fish. The fisherman pulls the hook. They share the line for a moment. Then the whale dives. This is a species with the acoustic, physical and cognitive tools to make fishing in its territory very dangerous for humans. It has chosen, collectively and consistently, to simply steal the fish instead. Some fishermen describe individual whales they recognise coming back season after season. The same animal, the same strategy, the same calm presence alongside the boat. The whales are managing their relationship with human fishing activity. They adapted their behaviour not to eliminate the boats, but to benefit from them. That's a sophisticated strategy. It requires recognising that the boat is a resource, not just a threat. It requires patience. It requires returning to the same boats across seasons, meaning memory is involved. And it requires deciding every single time not to escalate. That decision happens inside a brain that, as researchers have slowly discovered, operates in ways that still surprise even the people who study it most closely. Because some of the things sperm whales have done around humans in distress suggest they aren't just ignoring us. They're watching us. And sometimes, what they do next is something no one predicted. The Rosette incident from 2008 was not the only case. As researchers began looking more carefully through decades of encounter records, logged by divers, sailors and marine researchers across multiple ocean regions, a pattern emerged that nobody had formally documented before: sperm whales approaching struggling or injured humans, circling them, then leaving. A diver who surfaced with equipment failure near a research vessel in the Azores reported a whale surfacing beside her and circling slowly at close range for several minutes before the crew of her vessel reached her. She'd been waving for help on the surface in an unusual, irregular way, signalling distress. A sailor thrown overboard from a vessel in the Pacific reported a whale approaching and holding position nearby for a period he estimated at around 10 minutes, while he treaded water before his crew circled back. Accounts like these are harder to analyse scientifically because they are anecdotal, single-witness events without camera confirmation. Individual accounts can be wrong. Memory under stress is unreliable. Science requires reproducible data. But the accumulation of accounts across independent sources, different decades, different ocean regions, different circumstances, all describing the same general behaviour, is difficult to dismiss entirely. Something is producing this pattern. Researchers studying the acoustic signatures of sperm whale approaches have proposed a mechanism. When a human is in distress at the ocean surface, they move irregularly. Their breathing is audible, rapid and irregular. Their heart rate increases. The splashing pattern of someone struggling to stay afloat is acoustically distinct from someone swimming normally. Sperm whales, with their extraordinary acoustic sensitivity, detect all of this. They read the ocean the way a radar reads the sky. An irregular, struggling signal at the surface stands out. What happens next is the unresolved piece. Does the whale process that signal as just interesting? As a potential prey item that turns out to be a human? As something that matches an internal template for distress, the way it might respond to a struggling pod member? Researchers can't yet answer definitively. The honest position is that the behaviour happens, the acoustic mechanism for detecting it exists, and the whale consistently chooses to circle rather than flee or attack. The circling matters. It's the specific behaviour sperm whales use when maintaining proximity to something they're assessing. It keeps them close without committing them to action. It gives them information through continued scanning. The whale is deciding something, and that decision plays out against a backdrop that is changing rapidly. Because the ocean these whales move through, the acoustic environment that shapes every moment of their existence, is being transformed around them at a pace that the whale's biology was never built to handle. For a sperm whale, sound is everything. It's vision in a lightless ocean. It's language between family members separated by miles. It's the hunting tool that puts food in their stomachs and the map that guides them across thousands of miles of open water. Every relationship they have with the world around them runs through sound. An ocean full of clean, natural acoustics is, for a sperm whale, a complete sensory world. Clicks travelling miles, returning with echoes. Codas from a pod member far ahead, giving direction. The distant, low-frequency sounds of deep water currents, building an internal geography that guides migration. Now fill that ocean with human noise. Shipping engines run at frequencies that overlap with cetacean communication ranges. A single large cargo ship generates more continuous acoustic energy than most natural ocean events. There are currently over 90,000 commercial ships operating on the world's oceans at any given moment. Combined, they produce a baseline roar that researchers can measure at nearly any point in any ocean. The ocean's acoustic background noise has roughly doubled every decade since the 1950s. For a sperm whale relying on sound to navigate, hunt, and communicate, this is the equivalent of trying to have a conversation in a room where the background music keeps getting louder every year. Research teams placing acoustic recorders in shipping lanes have found that sperm whale click rates change in areas of high vessel traffic. Some whales produce more clicks at higher intensities, trying to push through the noise. Others reduce their clicking significantly in areas of intense acoustic pollution, which means they're navigating and communicating less. In the North Atlantic, researchers tracking sperm whales found that whale stress hormone levels, measurable from skin samples collected from the ocean surface after a whale passes, dropped significantly in the weeks following September 11, 2001, when commercial shipping traffic was briefly reduced across the region. The whales, in calmer acoustic conditions, were measurably less stressed. A single week of reduced shipping noise produced a measurable biological response in wild whale populations. The ocean these animals evolved for, the quiet, acoustically rich world their entire biology was built around, is disappearing. It's being replaced by a mechanical drone that runs at all hours, in all seasons, across all the migration routes and feeding grounds and social gathering spots that sperm whale culture has maintained for tens of thousands of years. And shipping noise, it turns out, is only the beginning. Because there is something else human technology puts into the ocean, something louder by orders of magnitude, that produces consequences so extreme that entire whale populations respond within hours. Military sonar operates at a different level than shipping noise. Active sonar systems used by naval vessels send out acoustic pulses at intensities that can reach 235 decibels. That's louder than the sperm whale's own click system. It sweeps through the water in powerful waves, designed to detect submarines across enormous ranges. For an animal whose entire sensory world is built on acoustic clarity, a sonar pulse at that intensity is something close to what a sudden, sustained, blinding light would be to a creature with sensitive eyes. In 2002, a naval exercise in the Canary Islands was followed within hours by the stranding of 14 beaked whales on nearby beaches. Stranding means swimming onto shore and being unable or unwilling to return to the sea. Stranded cetaceans in this condition almost always die. Post-mortem examinations of the stranded whales found hemorrhaging around the ears, brain tissue and other organs consistent with acoustic trauma. The whales had been physically damaged by the sound. The link between naval sonar exercises and cetacean strandings has now been documented enough times that the United States Navy acknowledges it as a causal relationship. Their environmental impact assessments include models projecting how many marine mammals will be injured or killed by planned sonar exercises. They plan around expected casualties. For sperm whales specifically, sonar encounters produce behavioural responses that researchers can track. Sudden, fast dives to depth, rapid changes of direction, cessation of clicking, meaning the whale goes acoustically blind in addition to being acoustically overwhelmed. Some whales surface far from their last known position hours later, having fled at speed. In regions with frequent sonar exercises, researchers have documented pod disruptions where family groups separated in apparent panic and took days to regroup. The acoustic trauma of sonar doesn't just damage ears, it fractures the social structure. A separated calf without its mother, in the open ocean, has a very low survival probability. Here's the part that carries weight. These are animals that absorbed centuries of whaling with almost no aggressive response. Animals that approach injured humans and circle them calmly. Animals that slow down for dying pod members and carry dead calves for days. They scatter in blind panic from a sound. The contrast is stark. The patience that defines sperm whale behaviour around humans, the restraint, the observation, the choosing to leave, holds across almost every scenario, except this one. The sonar cuts through all of it, and what it leaves behind in the data, in the stranding records, in the acoustic surveys of affected areas, is a species experiencing something that its entire social and emotional architecture is built to process and share. But they can't communicate through sound when the sound itself has become the danger. And yet, even when researchers looked at how sperm whales make decisions in quieter conditions, what they found was something that raised a question nobody had thought to ask before. A pod of sperm whales needs to decide which direction to travel. The calves need to stay near the surface to breathe frequently. The adults are hungry and want to dive to deeper, richer feeding grounds miles in a different direction. 2 older females seem to be orienting toward the east. A third is pointing north. The calves are clustered in the middle, and then, gradually, they all go east. How? Researchers studying sperm whale pod movement have found that direction changes within a group are preceded by a specific pattern of acoustic activity. Before the pod shifts course, there is an increase in coda exchanges between individuals. Multiple whales produce their personal coda signatures in rapid succession. The exchanges last several minutes, then the group moves. The pattern looks like information being shared and weighed before a decision is made. Luke Rendell and his colleagues analysed years of pod movement data alongside acoustic recordings and found a statistical tendency. The direction the pod ultimately moved correlated more strongly with the orientation of older, experienced females than with any other group members. The matriarchs pulled more weight, but they didn't simply override the group. The coda exchange still happened. Other whales still participated. The process still took time. Some researchers describe this as a voting-like mechanism, a weighted vote, where the most experienced individual carries the most influence, but the group's collective orientation still shapes the outcome. Weighted voting exists in human institutions because pure majority rule can override specialized knowledge, and pure authority can override collective intelligence. A good committee mixes both. Sperm whale pods appear to have solved the same problem. The comparison has obvious limits. Whales don't hold meetings with agendas. No whale raises a flipper to be recognized. But the functional structure, information exchange followed by weighted collective movement, accomplishes something similar to what structured human decision-making accomplishes. And if the pod makes group decisions using a process that weights experience and incorporates multiple voices, then the pod's history matters for its future choices. The memory of the matriarch shapes what the group does next, which brings up a question that starts to feel almost vertiginous the longer you sit with it. If a sperm whale has memory, social bonds, individual relationships, grief, culture, decision-making processes, and specialized cells associated with empathy, does it know it's a sperm whale? Does it know it's a someone? The mirror test is the traditional standard for self-awareness in animals. Place an animal in front of a mirror, mark its body somewhere it can only see in the mirror. See if the animal investigates the mark, which would indicate it recognizes the reflection as itself rather than as another animal. Great apes pass, elephants pass, dolphins pass, certain corvid birds pass. These are the species with confirmed mirror self-recognition. Sperm whales have never been tested. The logistics make it nearly impossible. A mirror large enough, deployed underwater, in conditions where a whale would encounter it naturally, has never been achieved in a controlled study. So the evidence for sperm whale self-awareness comes from other angles. Individual identity, the sense of being a specific self with a specific history, shows up in behaviour when animals act differently based on their own past experiences rather than on species-wide instincts. A whale that avoids a specific type of boat because it was harmed by that type of boat is responding to its individual history. A whale that approaches a familiar research vessel calmly because of past positive interactions is doing the same. Sperm whales do both of these things consistently. The coda signatures, the individual acoustic fingerprints embedded in each whale's communication pattern, suggest something even more specific. The whale produces a signature that is distinctly its own. Other whales recognize it as such. The signature persists across years. That is, at minimum, an acoustic identity. A way of saying, acoustically, this is me, separate from you. Whether that translates into a subjective sense of self, an inner experience of being someone rather than just being, is a question that neuroscience can't fully answer for any species, including humans. We assume our own inner experience because we have it. We can't directly access the inner experience of another mind. Philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote famously about the impossibility of truly knowing what it's like to be a bat. The same impossibility applies to knowing what it's like to be a sperm whale, but the behavioural and neurological evidence keeps pointing in one direction. The spindle neurons are there, the episodic memory structures are there, the individual signatures are there, the history-dependent behaviour is there. Something inside a sperm whale experiences its own existence in a way that is at least functionally similar to what we mean when we say someone has a self. And if that's true, then what the whales are communicating to each other, through decades of accumulated cultural exchange, through the codas and the meetings and the transmitted roots and the shared dialects, goes somewhere deeper than simple group coordination. It might be going somewhere that science hasn't built the vocabulary to describe yet. When researchers first began analysing sperm whale clicks in high resolution, they were looking for patterns, rhythms, structures that might carry information the way Morse code carries information. They found those patterns, and then they found something else inside the clicks that nobody had looked for. Micro-variations, tiny fluctuations in the acoustic properties of individual clicks, changes in frequency, in the shape of the pulse, in the way the sound rises and falls, that sit below the level of the click pattern itself. These micro-variations are consistent within individual whales and differ between individuals in ways that go beyond simple identity signatures. Researchers analysing clicks from the same whale recorded years apart found that the micro-variations changed over time, in correlation with the whale's social circumstances and health status. A whale that had recently lost a pod member produced click micro-variations that differed measurably from its baseline. A whale in a newly formed social bond produced different micro-variations again. The acoustic signal was changing in ways that seemed to reflect the whale's internal state. This is not confirmed language in any human sense. Researchers are careful to say that. The mechanism is not fully understood. The information content of these micro-variations hasn't been decoded. But the implication is significant. If the clicks carry not just identity and social coda patterns, but also something that reflects emotional or physiological state, then sperm whale communication is richer than a simple signal system. It's broadcasting something about the inside of the whale at every transmission. Think about what that means for a pod whose members are always clicking, always transmitting, always receiving. Every member is broadcasting something about their internal state to every other member, continuously through the water. The pod knows how everyone feels, all the time. Some researchers describe this as radical transparency, a social group where concealment of internal state is acoustically impossible, where the emotional and physiological condition of every individual member flows into the group's shared acoustic field constantly. Humans approximate this in close relationships. You learn to read the tone of a family member's voice, the rhythm of their movement, the subtle signals that say something is wrong before any words are exchanged. Sperm whales may be doing this constantly, at a resolution far higher than anything human social perception achieves, through their clicks. And if the pod has this level of awareness of each other's states, then what the group knows, collectively, about the world it moves through is genuinely staggering, including what it knows about us, about the strange air-breathing surface-bound creatures it encounters in boats, and what some researchers believe the whales have done with that knowledge over generations is something that, if it holds up, will change the way we think about animal intelligence permanently. The theory starts with the end of whaling. After the International Whaling Commission's moratorium on commercial whaling took effect in 1986, sperm whale populations that had been hunted for decades gradually began to stabilise. Researchers in areas with recovering populations noticed something in the following years. The whales were calmer around boats. Encounter records from the 1970s and early 1980s, during active whaling, describe sperm whales that would dive immediately upon detecting a vessel. Alert behaviour, rapid depth changes, acoustic shutdown, the classic responses of a prey species to a known threat. By the mid-1990s and into the 2000s, researchers in the same regions were recording something different: whales that approached vessels, whales that surfaced close to research boats and maintained proximity for extended periods, calves surfacing alongside mothers near human vessels without any apparent alarm from the adults. The behaviours changed across about one generation of whales. Sperm whale lifespans reach up to 70 years. The females alive during the moratorium in 1986 would have been in their prime reproductive years. The calves they raised grew up in waters where human vessels were present, but no longer posed an existential threat. Those calves watched their mothers' responses to boats. They learned the appropriate level of caution from observation. If the mothers were calmer, the calves learned calm. Hal Whitehead has written about this generational transmission of threat assessment as a form of cultural updating. The group's shared knowledge about humans changed as the evidence changed. Boats stopped meaning death. The cultural response to boats updated accordingly. This is behaviourally sophisticated in a way that goes beyond simple conditioning. Individual animals can learn from their own experience. Cultural updating requires the group to revise shared knowledge based on new patterns, and then transmit that revised knowledge to the next generation before the individuals who experience the change have died. It requires something like collective memory, a shared record of how the world works that outlasts any individual member. Sperm whale pods appear to have exactly this. The dialects persist across generations, the migration routes persist, the social rules persist, and now some researchers argue the updated relationship with humans persists too, being passed down through coders, through behaviour modelling, through the slow, continuous education that happens inside a pod over decades. If this holds, then the calm of a sperm whale floating next to your boat today is, in part, inherited. It came from a generation of whales that lived through the worst and survived it, and somehow decided not to pass the fear forward. That is an extraordinary thing for any animal to do. But it becomes even more extraordinary when you run the numbers on what would actually happen if the whales made the opposite decision. Set aside the fact that they don't, just run the scenario. A sperm whale weighs around 100,000 pounds. Its tail generates enough force to flip a small boat with a single strike. Its sonar can locate and map a vessel from hundreds of feet away in complete darkness. It can dive deeper than any human technology can reliably follow. It can communicate with other whales across miles. Now consider that there are roughly 300 to 500,000 sperm whales in the world's oceans right now, with population estimates still recovering after the whaling era. The global commercial fishing fleet numbers around 4 million vessels. Most of them are small, operating in coastal and offshore waters that overlap directly with sperm whale habitat. A coordinated or even loosely unified behavioural shift across sperm whale populations toward treating human vessels as threats would be catastrophic for ocean-based human industry. The whales would not need to destroy boats. They would not need to kill anyone. Disrupting fishing nets, sonar equipment, and navigation lines, activities they already do accidentally on a regular basis, scaled up intentionally, would be enough. The whales have the intelligence to adapt, the sonar to locate targets precisely, the social structure to spread learned behaviours across populations, and the acoustic communication system to transmit strategies across thousands of miles of ocean in real time. Human naval technology could respond, but the ocean is 330 million cubic miles of water. Tracking and deterring hundreds of thousands of individually intelligent deep-diving animals across that volume is, practically speaking, not something current technology can accomplish. This is not a prediction, it's arithmetic. The point is that the whale's restraint isn't born from inability. They have the tools, they have the numbers, they have the communication infrastructure to coordinate on a scale that would matter. They choose not to. That choice, made daily by an animal smart enough to make a different one, is what puts sperm whales in a category that most of the animal kingdom doesn't reach. It's not just intelligence. It's intelligence paired with something that looks, from every angle available to science, like a deliberate culturally transmitted decision to coexist. And the researchers who have spent the most time with these animals are the first to say that what we know barely scratches the surface. Shane Giro has spent over 15 years in the water with sperm whales. He has identified hundreds of individuals by name. He has listened to thousands of hours of their coders. He has watched calves grow into adults, watched adults grieve, watched pods make decisions and change direction, and interact with strangers from other clans. He says, openly and often, that he feels like he's standing at the edge of something enormous and can only see a few feet into it. This is the consensus position of the field. The tools for studying sperm whales are genuinely new. Acoustic tags that attach to whales with suction cups and record sound and movement for hours have only been refined in the last 2 decades. Drone technology capable of stable, close-range aerial observation without disturbing the animals became practical only recently. Genetic sampling techniques that allow population-level studies without capture have matured in the last 10 years. The data collected using these tools has already overturned assumptions that held for generations. Sperm whales have culture. They have dialects. They grieve. They sleep in vertical clusters. They adopt animals from other species. They remember individual humans. They may vote on group decisions. Every one of those findings came from researchers who started with different assumptions and followed the data somewhere unexpected. What comes next, as better tools allow deeper access, is genuinely unknown. The click micro variations that seem to carry emotional state information are only beginning to be analysed systematically. The acoustic structure of coda exchanges between different clans has barely been mapped. The relationship between a specific whale's individual history and its specific behavioural patterns across decades has almost no literature. The sperm whale's deep-sea life, the hunts, the solo male expeditions to polar waters, the behaviour during the deepest dives remains almost entirely unobserved. Cameras and tags can record the first minutes of a dive. Below a certain depth, in the total darkness and crushing pressure where these animals spend a significant portion of their lives, they are completely alone from science. What they do there, what they experience there, what information they bring back to the surface and transmit to their pods through codas and behaviour, nobody knows. The ocean is deep enough that the most intelligent, socially complex predator alive can disappear into it completely, live a full and extraordinary life, and surface again without science having captured a single frame of the most important parts of its existence. And that gap between what we know and what is actually happening down there is where the final question lives. The question that all of this has been building toward. Everything in this video has been pointing at one thing. A 60-foot animal with a brain the size of a watermelon, cells built for empathy, a cultural tradition spanning thousands of years, and the physical power to make human presence in its ocean genuinely dangerous. And it chooses day after day, ocean after ocean, generation after generation not to. That choice demands a question that science doesn't usually ask, because science deals in mechanisms and data and reproducible findings. The question is a different kind. What does it mean that the most powerful animal alive is also one of the most restrained? Humans have spent most of our history assuming that intelligence plus power equals dominance. We built civilizations on that assumption. We expanded into every environment on Earth, altered ecosystems, hunted species to extinction, filled the ocean with noise, and generally operated as though the world existed for our use. Sperm whales have been alive for millions of years. They have intelligence that rivals ours in some dimensions. They have social structures that maintain culture across centuries. They have the tools to contest our presence in their world. They don't. Some researchers have speculated that sperm whale restraint is evolutionary, that nothing in their history equipped them to respond to humans with targeted aggression, so they simply default to their social baseline, which is curiosity and tolerance. This is a clean explanation. It requires no uncomfortable conclusions about whale consciousness or choice. Other researchers look at the behavioural data and find it insufficient. The memory is too specific. The cultural transmission is too active. The situation-dependent response is too fine-grained. These animals are reading each encounter as it comes and responding to what they find. And what they almost always find when they scan a human with their sonar, when they read the heartbeat and the soft body and the metal equipment and the irregular breathing, is something that does not register as a threat. The whale looks at you. It reads you completely in 1 second, and it decides you're not worth the energy, or it decides something else, something we don't have the language for yet. Something that lives in the 30 million years of spindle neurons and social transmission and cultural memory and pod solidarity that makes a sperm whale what it is. Here is what we are left with. The largest brain ever to exist, inside an animal that could be the ocean's apex predator in any dimension you choose to measure, looks at the species that hunted it toward extinction. That fills its ocean with noise, that scars its body with propellers, that breaks its social groups apart with sonic weapons, and it circles slowly, and it nudges a drowning diver to the surface, and it slows down for its dying, and it adopts a dolphin that can't keep up, and it passes all of this somehow to the next generation. The whale chose something. Whatever word you want to use for it, the whale chose it. And if an animal with that much power can make that choice, inside an ocean that we have made harder to live in with every decade that passes, then the question that rises to the surface, quiet and heavy as a whale coming up to breathe, is whether we can make a similar one. If you made it this far, subscribe and leave a like. We'll be here next time.